Someone might need to write me an obituary because I feel like death. Alright, guys, welcome to a very hungover and tired edition of Young James Does Death Metal. We are on episode 3, and to give a recap, this is a series that I'm doing for the podcast Into the Combine because they were nice enough to do a death metal episode on how to get someone who's new to death metal, or, new to more extreme forms of metal, down the death metal path and lead them down the righteous road. So, for all two of you that might not be here because of Into the Combine, Into the Combine is a really cool podcast. The guys that do it are really great guys. It's very entertaining. They talk about anything from death metal to grind to hardcore to a little bit of metalcore and this, that, and the other. They're really cool guys. It's a really fun time to listen to them. And so I'm doing this because of them. And so, recap, the first album that I listened to on their list was The Anthropocene Extinction by Cattle Decapitation, and I gave that a ranking of 8. Thought it was a good introductory kind of death metal album to get someone started down the path. And then the last one I did, episode number 2, was The Fourth Crusade by Bolt Thrower, which I gave a rating of 7. Most of the discussion for this actually occurs on Into the Combine's Patreon page on Facebook, and I highly recommend you guys go join the Patreon. It's a lot of fun. The bonus episodes are a little bit more goofy and laid back, and there's a little bit more debate that goes on. It's only like $1 to like $3 a month. It's super cheap, and I think it's well worth it, so you guys should check it out. So today, this is episode number 3, and this was The End Complete by Obituary. And so a little backstory, I love Obituary. I listen to quite a bit of their stuff. Inked in Blood is probably one of my favorite metal albums ever. I absolutely love Inked in Blood. And then I believe their self-titled probably was on like my top 10 metal albums of 2017. I thought that was a really good album. So Obituary is by no means new to me. So we'll start with the first 3 things. What was I doing when I listened to this album? This is probably going to be a recurring answer, but I was running. I was running for a couple times, and then I did a lot of driving. So this weekend, I went to my girlfriend's college and partied a lot and slept very little. And it's Sunday. I just got back from my trip to her college. And I had a chance to listen to this, for probably, honestly, the 5th or 6th time in the past week or so. And so I wanted to get to this video while it was fresh on my mind. And I didn't do a video last week, and so I'm going to try to do 2 videos this week to kind of make up for that. So I was driving a lot when I listened to this album. What beer am I drinking? A nice tasty Busch Light. And described in a few words, to me this just sounds like a very classic, it's a classic sounding death metal album to me, and I really don't know if there's another way to put it. So, general thoughts. I already mentioned that I've already listened to Obituary a lot, and, to think that they're death metal, again, I wouldn't consider them like a very typical death metal sounding band, but I guess someone put it on the Facebook page that to them, Bolt Thrower was kind of classic death metal. So that's why I would think I would describe Obituary as another just kind of classic sounding death metal band. But you can, I know that they're, from the South, and so it's probably like a classic Southern death metal album, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm way off on that. Again, I'm a fucking idiot, and I'm very new to this genre, so I could be way off. But that's just kind of how I would put it. It's a classic Southern death metal album. It was much more entertaining and fun and easier for me to listen to than Bolt Thrower, because Bolt Thrower, I already touched on this, was kind of the same. Well, The Fourth Crusade, their album The Fourth Crusade, was kind of sounded the same throughout, and they kind of beat to death some riffs and stuff. I didn't have that problem with this Obituary album. I thought it was a little bit similar to Bolt Thrower, but they don't do the same thing over and over again. They keep it fresh, they keep it going, and I definitely didn't get bored. It was much easier for me to listen to. As someone who isn't used to death metal, I think it's really important that it shouldn't feel like a chore for the listener to get through an album, and this one was the exact opposite of that. I enjoyed listening to this album. Again, similar to Bolt Thrower, this album is kind of like a groove versus speed. Like they'll kind of groove out for a little bit, and then they'll speed it up and go to a faster paced riff and vocal style, and it just kind of keeps it fresh and keeps you guessing what's coming next. And again, like I said on Bolt Thrower, the drumming is super tight. I can't remember which Tardy brother it is that does the drumming. I think John Tardy is the vocalist, but I can't remember the other brother's name. But again, the drumming is super tight on the album, and the snare sounds fucking sweet. The snare just has this nice super tight snap to it that I love. It sounds like someone's taking a fucking sledgehammer and just beating the ground with it every time he hits that snare, and I love it. So I would have to say we're 3 albums in, and this has to be my favorite album so far. Now, I'm probably biased because, like I said, I have already listened to Obituary. I really like Obituary, but this is probably my favorite of the 3 that I've listened to so far. But we got a long way to go, so that could change. So I'm not holding my breath. My favorite song was In the End of Life, with the main riff that goes on. It's just kind of got like a stompy main riff that opens the song, and I really like that. And then I really like how they really slow that riff down at the end of the song. I think that was a really cool way to end it. Honorable mentions, Back to One. That doesn't even sound right. Is that a song on this album? Could be. I wrote it down in my honorable mentions. The End Complete and I'm in Pain, which is the opener. I thought it was a really strong opener. And I think there's some like feedback in that, which is kind of like makes me think of a hardcore song with all that like feedback that goes on in the beginning of it. So it kind of gets you amped up and hyped and ready to listen. And for this album, I have to mention some specific parts that I absolutely loved. So The End Complete, at the end of that song, they do like this stop-start kind of riff, and I thought that was really cool. In Corrosive, there's like this bass riff that leads into this kind of what I would call a breakdown, and I really liked how everything just cuts out, and then you just hear the bass play a couple of lines, and then they hit this breakdown. That's a really cool part. And then the riff to Killing Time literally kept me up one night. It was addictive. And it kept me up one night, and it kind of pissed me off. But that's good. It means that the album was catchy, it kept me entertained, and that riff is just super infectious for some reason. I don't know why, but it stuck with me for a night. And so, like I've kind of hit at, overall it was just more of like a catchier album that kept my attention better than the Bolt Thrower album. And like I said, that's really important for someone trying to go down this road who's used to listening to metalcore and hardcore. You have to have catchy parts that make you want to come back and listen to it again, and sometimes they keep you up at night, and it's frustrating. So the 3 main things I'll talk about first is production, and this is the one place that I have to complain about the album. And I think the guitar tone and the overall mixing of the guitar really sucks, especially when you go back and listen to Inked in Blood or the self-titled that just came out in 2017. The guitar is really strong in those 2 albums, and on this album, I don't think the guitar is nearly loud enough. It doesn't cut through at all. One example that I listed is in the opening song, I'm in Pain, that last riff, the guitar almost like completely seems to disappear, and that really sucks. I feel like the guitar could have a lot more punch. I know this album was recorded in 1992, but I know there's other albums that were recorded in the early 90s that sound better than this. as far as the guitar is concerned. So I don't know what they were doing there, and maybe it's just my ears. Maybe I'm not hearing what everyone else hears, but to me, the guitar sucks. And that really sucks because the riffing and the grooves and the speed riffs and all that stuff, it's really awesome riffing that they're doing. I just wish the guitar cut through. I want the guitar to be louder. The drums, however, are mixed super well. I already mentioned the super snappy snare drum. And you can pick out the bass. I think the mix just didn't get the guitar in there the way it needed to. And that really sucks. That's like my one and only complaint about this album. The second thing that I'll touch on is song structure. And it's more varied than Bolt Thrower. It's kind of samey, or it's kind of similar to Bolt Thrower, how they have the groove, but they have the speed and everything. But it's a lot more varied and a lot more kind of erratic in the way they structure their songs to how you kind of go from one thing to the next. It's not just like a linear line. And then the third thing is vocals. I've always enjoyed John Tardy's vocals. I wouldn't say he's like a really good vocalist. I wouldn't say he's great, but he's so unique. You know you're listening to John Tardy when you hear his vocals. He's easy to pick out, and I really like that. And I think it's easy for a hardcore kid like myself to listen to because they're not typical hardcore, or they're not typical death metal vocals. They're not really shouted like they are hardcore, or like hardcore vocals are. But they're super, you can understand what he's saying, and they're still gritty and mean sounding, but they're not just like pig squeals or gutturals or anything. And I just really enjoy John Tardy's voice, so that's good. For a rating, I'm going to give this an 8. It's a really strong album for getting someone into death metal. So I'm going to give it an 8. I think it's really solid, which I gave the Cattle Decapitation album an 8, and I would almost be willing to drop Cattle Decapitation down to like a 7.5 when I compare it to this, because I just enjoy this album that much more. I still think I like Inked in Blood better than this album, but you can't really go wrong with Obituary, and that's the beautiful thing about it. So even though I liked Inked in Blood better, I definitely will see myself coming back to this album to listen to it again. And I wouldn't say it's like as extreme of death metal as I'm kind of anxious to hear, and there are some more extreme ones on this list, so don't worry. And I'm kind of anxious to hear them, but even then, I still loved listening to this album. It was just a really fun listen for me. So yeah, that's a third episode of Young James Does Death Metal. Hopefully I can get another episode out this week. I'm sorry if I was talking fast. I tend to do that when I'm tired and wiped out. I'm really tired. It's my bedtime. Hopefully there's not an obituary in the papers for me tomorrow because I died. Thanks for listening, guys. Like I said, if you want to join in on the conversation, most of it goes down in Into the Combine's Patreon page. It's well worth the $1 or $2 you're going to spend a month. I absolutely love everybody in the group. So with that being said, you stay young and you stay metal.